we're going to look at percents. Many of you have probably worked with percents before, but this is our first lesson in this class, so that's where we start. Percent is made up of actually two words, per and cent. Per means you're going to divide. Cent means 100. So whenever you see percent, it means you're going to divide by 100. You might see 15%. The problem with seeing something like 15%, you can't really work with a percent sign. So we have percents, we have decimals, and we have fractions. So basically, to work with a percent, you need to change it either to a decimal or a fraction. Decimals, if you think of our decimal system, the whole number part is in front of the decimal, and behind the decimal point, we have tenths and hundredths. Make sure I spell it right, hundredths. Okay. When changing from a percent to a decimal, remember the percent sign means to divide by 100. So this means I'm going to take 15 and divide it by 100, which is actually going to give you 15 hundredths. You can put a 0 in front of the decimal point. To change it to a fraction, the percent sign just means it's 15 divided by 100. Now, whenever we work with fractions, we want to reduce them as much as possible or simplify them. In this case, I know that 15 and 100 are both divisible by 5. So I can divide the top and the bottom, the numerator and denominator, by 5. And that's going to give me 3 over 20. 3/20ths is the same as 15 hundredths. The decimal you would read is 15 hundredths, and the percent is 15%. So you should be able to change from percents to decimals to fractions, fractions to percents to decimals, and decimals to fractions to percents. Any way you're asked to do it, you need to be able to do that. You might not be given something as simple as 15%. .5%. You're going to do the same things. This time, I'm going to change it to a fraction first. I know that percent means to divide by 100. So whenever you see the percent symbol, you know that means you're going to divide it by 100. So that would be the same as 4.5 divided by 100. Now, the problem here is we've got a decimal and a fraction. That's really not pleasant. Most of you don't like fractions. You're not crazy about decimals. So if we have fractions and decimals mixed together, it makes it even more difficult to work with. So what you can do, there's a decimal point after that, 100. If you move this decimal point over one place, you move this decimal over the same number of places. basically what we've done is multiply the numerator and the denominator by 10. And that gives you 45 over 1,000. Now, I also know that both of these are divisible by 5. That's going to give me, to reduce it, 45 divided by 5 is 9, and 1,000 divided by 5 is 200. And there is no number that will go into 9 and 200. So, that's what we get when we change it to a fraction. To change it to a decimal, I say that for last because that is the easiest thing to do. Remember, the decimal place is 2 decimals over, is hundredths place. So you move the decimal point 2 places. Well, I can't just leave a space there. Okay, that still looks like 0.45. In order to move it 2 places, if there are 2 places, you have to add a 0. So the decimal equivalent is 0.045, which is 45 thousandths. That's hundredths, that's thousandths. You can put a 0 in front of the decimal point, but when counting decimal places, to the right of the decimal point, we don't count the 1 in front. Okay. Let's see. Let's just try one more example to make sure that this is clear. Let's say you've got 175%. There are situations where having a percent over 100 does not make any sense. If I said that 175% of the class was here today, that would probably mean we drug people in from the street, because if everyone was here, it'd be 100%. In order to have more than 100%, we've got extras in the classroom. However, if I was told that my pay was going to increase by 175%, I would probably be ecstatic, because 100%, if it increased 100%, that would be double my pay. So if it increased by 175%, that's not quite 3 times, but it's getting close. So there are times when over 100% makes sense. There are other times when it's not very likely. To change it to a decimal, again, if there's no decimal point, and if you look at this, there's no decimal point, and I don't want you to make a decimal point that looks like that. You might be able to see that it's there, but when I'm grading your papers, I can't tell. I'm older probably than most of you are, so my eyesight might not be that good. If there's a decimal point, I want you to make sure that you can see it. Okay? And if there is no decimal point, it's at the end of the number, which is what I did with this. When changing it percent to a decimal, you always move the decimal point 2 places. 2 places would put it right there. So as a decimal, that is 1.75. Now, remember, the percent sign means divide by 100. So if I'm changing that to a fraction, I have 175 divided by 100. If you're not good at dividing by 25, think of it as money. If you had $1.75, that should be 7 quarters. That's what 175 is divided by 25. If I divide 100 by 25, that's 4 quarters or 4. Now, you might look at 7/4 and say, but that's not simplified because the numerator is bigger than the denominator. Simplified means that there are no numbers that you can divide out. There are no numbers that can be divided out. That is a simplified fraction. It's an improper fraction. And you might want to change it to a mixed number, but you don't have to. If you insisted on changing that to a mixed number, it would be 1 3/4. But I'm not going to write that down because 7/4 is an acceptable answer. So we were given 175%. We wrote it as a decimal, and then we wrote it as a fraction. And that is our lesson on percents for today.